Grandma, can I have the chocolate chips?
This secret recipe moment made possible by Emory Heart and Vascular Center. When Grandma needed heart care, she came to Emory. The difference? Emory Healthcare performs more heart procedures annually than anyone else in Georgia, which means better outcomes for our patients. And we offer advanced and personalized treatments developed by our top specialists that others don't. Like Grandma knows, where you start your heart care matters. Smart Cookie. EmoryHealthcare.org/smartcookie.
Hello everybody and welcome to our extended free preview of our What a Cartoon movie about Batman Beyond Return of the Joker. I am one of your hosts, Bob Mackey, and I am not a fan of that green Joker on the cover. Get rid of him, I say.
And hey, it's Henry Gilbert, Space Laser Apologist. And hello.
And yes, every month we do this thing called What a Cartoon Movie, and in that podcast we spend about, let's say, 3 to 5 hours talking about a movie chosen by our patrons, and this month's movie is the Batman Beyond movie, Return of the Joker, an amazing piece of secretly Japanese animation that was snuck overseas and sold as a Batman movie.
Yeah, it's a ton of fun. We talk about how TMS's involvement on it. We name names on technically the co-director of this movie, and go super into the history of it and what an interesting time it was during TMS's overseas productions and what they were working on and not working on. And of course, if you're a Batman fan, you know that this film went through some edits and cuts, and we talk about how it happened. We catalog each major cut. It's so much fun.
Yes, if you want to hear the whole thing after you like this free preview, head on over to patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. Sign up there for $10. You'll get the rest of this podcast plus our extensive What a Cartoon Movie catalog. Now almost 3 entire years of What a Cartoon Movie monthly podcast, and that is over 200 hours of podcasts just on that brand alone.
Yeah, I'd estimate it to that. And it's funny, our first one 3 years ago, Batman Mask of the Phantasm. Now our last one at the end of the 3rd year, Batman Beyond Return of the Joker. And there's so many great movies in between that.
That's right, and also, if you're not a patron currently, you also get our $5 rewards as well, and that includes all of our limited miniseries. And not coincidentally, there is currently a Batman the Animated Series miniseries happening behind the $5 paywall that is Blabbing About Batman, the Animated Series. We're going over our 10 favorite episodes of Batman the Animated Series on that podcast, and of course, if you sign up for the $10 level, you get that as well every week to the end of 2021.
So many exclusives you get for your money. It's definitely worth it. If you haven't yet checked it out, please check it out at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. And now, without further ado, why don't we head back to the future? Wait, that's a different thing. But, hey, we'll talk all about Return of the Joker. So why don't we pick up where we left off in our primary Batman Beyond episode? If you want to hear how that series started, listen to that whole podcast. Short version is Kids WB demanded a younger, hipper, in high school, cool Batman, and their answer to that was fine. It's Akira and Cyberpunk, and the main character's basically Spider-Man, and he's bossed around by old Batman. And apparently the first ratings at the start of 1999 were going really well. They were fans of it, even though they were worried about the violence in a post-Columbine era, as would come in April of 1999. But Warner was big fans of it. They made a full order for what would essentially be 2 seasons, but it was just an assurance of, you will get 52 episodes. We want 52 episodes to make this a rerun forever kind of TV show.
The only good thing about becoming inured to tragedy, like, gun massacres, pandemics, is that we're just so dead inside, no media is censored anymore. They don't care. It's just like COVID happened and then 5 games about viruses came out immediately afterwards.
Exactly.
And they were like, fuck it, who cares?
Is that in the news? Whatever. I mean, also the way you're inured to it is you can just say like, oh, Columbine, remember that? If I said like, Sandy Hook, you don't know what year that is off the top of your head, right? It's just like, well, Sandy Hook, okay, Obama was president. Like, I can't think when it was.
The Pulse massacre in Florida.
Yeah.
Not to get too down up front here, but
you know what? I know that one's 2016. Okay. It was right before. It was one of those things of like, oh yeah, this is the worst year ever, 2016. But anyway, in 1999, they're like, we don't just want 52 total episodes of Batman Beyond. We also want a Batman Beyond direct-to-video movie. And this came at a time when Batman movies were in a very weird place. So 1993, we had The Mask of the Phantasm, which they originally thought they'd do in video. Then they're like, oh, let's put this out in theaters. It bombs in theaters. Then they put it out on video. It sells really great. In 1997, they planned to make, in the original version of the Batman the Animated Series style, a movie called Sub-Zero, which was actually meant to surf the wave of Batman and Robin. Because Batman and Robin, the live-action movie's in theater with Mr. Freeze in it. And they're like, oh, when we put out a direct-to-video movie with Mr. Freeze in it that's a cartoon, everybody will buy it. But the response to Batman and Robin was so negative, they're like, we're going to delay this an entire year to 1998. And that's when we're releasing Sub-Zero. So they sat on it for a year, but then when they released Sub-Zero, it looks like old Batman when Kids WB has new Batman style already like airing.
And that's why I rented it.
Yeah, yeah, like I can live in the past with this old Batman. I mean, it does look better.
Yeah, they didn't forget about me.
But yeah, like, so Batman and Robin was really, really, really poorly received. Though if you look at it, it's like, you know, it still made money, but it was just so negative. Everybody in Warner was like, what do we do with Batman? Just overall, what do they do with Batman? And the director of Sub-Zero, Boyd Kirkland, he actually, after Sub-Zero, was already developing another Batman concept called Arkham, which would be Batman and his sidekicks battling their way out of an asylum full of villains. The concept that actually got its start as one of the episodes we're doing for Blabbing About Batman, Trial.
Okay.
Character concept art is out there, and they actually, if you look at it, it seems like they decided it wouldn't look like the Batman the Animated Series look. It would be a separate kind of stylistic look to it. But eventually they decided, nah, we're not going to do any Arkham stuff with a grown-up Batman. In 1999, they pull the plug on Arkham and decide that budget is going to a Batman Beyond direct-to-video movie. And so Boyd Kirkland's Arkham would never live. But if you look at the story on it, I have a feeling Paul Dini was like, hey, this works pretty good for a video game.
I'll put this in a drawer for, let's say, 9 years.
Yeah. So the show premieres, Batman Beyond. Big success. They talk to the staff, Dini, Tim, Murakami, and Burnett, and say, we want a full movie for this. And Dini, this I know from a 2012 interview that he did with Kevin Smith on... Kevin Smith is way better as a podcaster now because he is like, they basically does a watch along of this movie with Paul Dini, and he is like stoned out of his mind. He forgets the plot. He's like, hey, wait, is that the Joker? He's like, well, no, the Joker. He's like, whoa, Harley dies? And then Paul's like, he kind of like, I'm reading into his sounds, but he sounds resigned of like, you don't fucking remember my movie. Like, God.
Now, I mean, he's cleaned up his act a bit, and I'm totally fine with marijuana and stuff. And I have podcasted, a little tipsy sometimes in the past. We're very sober now. In fact, I drink too much coffee during these. But I would never podcast stoned.
No.
And I don't know how he did it for so long.
And with somebody like such a big guest as Paul Dini talking about their work, like I'm stoned out of my mind, and I'm just, that'd be like having Matt Groening on and be like, so Bart is really cool. Like, I'd say the most embarrassing bit in listening to it, and I paid $5 for this to hear their back catalog, is when he sees Terry with his girlfriend. He goes like, yeah, guys can see that Batman likes Asian chicks. That's hot, man. I was like, yeah, oh boy. But so Dini in that 2012 interview says that they were able to also pitch this Batman Beyond movie successfully because Batman and Robin flopped so hard, they were ready to try anything. It's also why at the same time, or about a year after this, Dini and Burnett start developing a Batman Beyond live action film at Warner because they're like, we don't know, man. We're done after Batman and Robin. Let's figure something out. But so they're given the task of making a movie, and Tim is like, you just ordered us to 52 episodes. We had a rough first season. This is going to be even harder. We don't know how we're going to do this with our full staff. And they said that the only way they knew how to do it is if TMS was available. Tokyo Movie Shinsha. If you've not heard me and Bob fawning over TMS for like the last 5 years of podcasts, they're the best studio that did overseas animation in the 90s, pretty much.
Yeah, and this was around the time that they were starting to get a little too pricey for American animation.
Yes, yeah. And so, but Tim was like, if we could get them for this movie, it can be done. And to quote Bruce Timm on the commentary, TMS saved us. Like, because But Return of the Joker would not exist any other way, not just because it was written in America and 50% storyboarded in America and character designs in America too, voice casting as well. But half the storyboarding,
Oh, wow.
layouts, animation, full animation, pre-production, and direction, true direction. No offense to Kurt Gator, the director of this, but the real director of this was at TMS, and TMS did all of that. So I'd say you should credit, I'd say 60% of this movie's quality to TMS.
I'm surprised they at least try to do all the storyboarding in the U.S. if they can.
Yeah, well,
for these overseas things.
As Tim said on the commentary, like they literally couldn't. There was no way. They got 2 or 3 American storyboarders to board stuff, but then they just had to like highlight 50% of the script is like, that just has to be TMS. We can't do all of this. And a lot of it was the action, that which is why the action rules in this movie. So they decide, all right, what's the big question we could do for a movie? And, you know, as we mentioned in the Batman Beyond podcast, a big thing they didn't want to do was future Batman fights Riddler Jr., fights Clayface Jr., fights... They wanted him to mostly fight original villains. And a big one was that he would fight, you know, an Akira-style clown gang called the Jokers, but he wouldn't actually fight the Joker. They thought, okay, fine, let's really do it. Let's have the Joker. Let's get Mark Hamill back. Let's do it. And Paul Dini teams up with Bruce Timm and Glenn Murakami to flesh out an entire story. This is kind of like them having their dessert after their main course. They're like, you know what? We set up this whole world. Let's just have the Joker. Let's do it. So yeah, they decided they're going to do it. They would also decide that the home video would be another place to answer another question everybody was asking. We see old Bruce, we see old Batgirl. What happened to Robin? And so they thought, you know, 2 birds with 1 stone. No pun intended. I did intend that pun, but yes. So they're going to answer what happened to Robin as well. They come up with the full outline, all the twists, the space lasers, all this stuff. Bruce Timm actually joked that originally he thought of like, oh, instead of a space laser, let's have it be a satellite that's about to crash down to Earth that the Joker paints to look like a giant pie, like he's throwing a pie at Earth. Murakami and Dini were like, that's stupid. No, we're not doing that.
You know, unlike Star Wars, they had the foresight to not open their movie with somehow the Joker has returned.
Yes, yeah. It was very important for Dini to have answers. Like there's jokes in this about what a bad answer would be, and how he's like, oh, this would be a lame answer. Though even he is slightly defensive, like, look, it's not the perfect answer.
Yeah, it's Metal Gear science.
It is. It really is. And so they finish the outline together, but Paul Dini is tasked with writing the full script, which he basically describes as incredibly painful, of just slamming his head into his laptop for 6 weeks straight until finally getting it out. And he said it was even worse for him because he had friends at Disney at the time who were bragging to him that they got a whole year to, you know, write a final script that would be made into a feature, and he's got 6 weeks to do it. But they sell it to Warner Brothers. They're like, here's the script. And part of it was, there's an edge to this. Like, this is edgier and more violent than what we do on the TV show, and they had been up in the edge factor as they went anyway on all their DCAU stuff. And so they were selling it to Warner like, hey, just like we did Sub-Zero and Phantasm break rules. Like they do stuff you can't do on TV. Characters die in Mask of the Phantasm. But in this case, they're like, we're going to go even farther. Though they had some stuff in the script and storyboards that even Warner was like, well, okay, his body can't twitch. You can't do that, guys.
We need some non-death groans, too.
Then they decide who's going to be the director of it. They pick Kurt Gaeta. He was the director of about half of the episodes in the first season, and he starts directing some for the second season, but then they take him off to work on this. And this is like a full-time job, so he doesn't direct a lot of episodes he would have for Batman Beyond, which opens up a position for James Tucker, who's one of the best directors of that era of Batman, who still works on the Batman cartoons at Warner to this day. He's great. But who's this Kurt Gaeta fellow? Well, he got to start on junk like Yo Yogi, Little Clowns of Happy Town.
Don't know it.
And some early TMNT before becoming one of the early hires on Batman the Animated Series. He boarded on classics like Heart of Ice, Feet of Clay, Joker's Favor. And so when he's that good on the original Batman run, it's not a surprise that when they moved over to work on Superman, they're like, this guy should be a director. He's going to be one of our top directors on the series. Gaeta is the director for the pilot of the Superman series and the finale of the Superman series, and was the director on multiple episodes of New Adventures of Batman. So Kurt Gaeta, as we mentioned on the Batman Beyond podcast, they just kept the train moving. They're like, oh, technically this is just the 4th season of New Adventures of Batman, but we have to create a whole new series instead. And Gaeta was very important on getting that done as well. And so Gaeta, he moves over to work on this, and he takes a few other people from Batman Beyond with him, but honestly not that many, because they really couldn't spare that many full-timers to work on this. And he did about half of the storyboarding, or it was him and a guy called Bob Smith. They did about half the storyboarding of the movie, letting TMS take care of the rest of it, which I'll get to that. But during the production, though, as they work on the animatic, they find out that the movie is 90 minutes long. And Warner has decided they are not going to pay for 90 minutes of animation. They're going to pay for 76 minutes of animation, equivalent to what could be rerun as 3 TV episodes. And so they have to cut 14 minutes from a completed animatic. They also published the full script of this in the year 2000. So you can read the scenes that were there and see some of the animatics for it. I'll mention it when we do the movie talk. But they're under the purview of Warner Home Media for this. They don't have to answer to Kids WB, which is already tightening their belts violence-wise on Columbine. So Gaeta and his team, they cut kind of loose. I mean, the point of the story is this is the end of the Batman the Animated Series original timeline, because it was the time the Joker went too far. And if they're going to show when the Joker went too far, then you got to freak people out.
Yeah, I forgot. I mean, it had been so long since I saw this. I forgot it's secretly the finale of that series.
Yes.
Because there could be no more adventures.
The Joker's dead. Everybody's dead. It is the finale. But so as they're working on it, there is an interesting sea change that is happening at Warner as well, because they have Jean McCurdy, their rock. She is their protector in the boardroom because she greenlit the show under Tim and Radomski when they were nobodies. She has been protecting them for the longest time in Warner Animation, and she had been put in charge of Kids WB when it started. But by the year 2000, Jean McCurdy's losing power. She's not as important as she used to be in that system. And Paul Dini, I think, had respect for her, but not for other people at Kids WB. But seemingly everything's going fine as they're plugging away to a fall 2000 release. So there's another person I want to talk about on top of Kurt Gaeta, and that is character designer Shane Glines, who we haven't talked a ton about before, but he is one of the, if you think of the sharper character models of the second era of BTAS, Glines is all about that. He was a 1994 hire by Tim. He is really good at drawing in the Bruce Timm style. He put his portfolio on his Twitter account, and there's like multiple nudes in it.
Oh.
Like it's just he draws some sexy ladies in the Bruce Timm
That's
style.
why Tim hired him.
It is why he hired him. On one of the commentary tracks, there's two commentary tracks for this movie.
Wow.
When the Dee-Dees are beating up a guy, they're just like, man, Shane drew that, right? When girls are beating up a guy, that's a Shane drawing. But and also, if you remember from the TV opening for Batman Beyond, where his girlfriend Dana has kind of this like sexy head turn, all of that is Shane Glines. He drew that. So if you look up some of his old art, you can definitely see that he designed all of the sidekicks, the Joker gang in this, though the Joker is a lot more Bruce Timm, and then I think Glines like sharpened it up just a little bit. And he also, after working on all of these Tim projects, he then worked also on the very horny and insidery Harley and Ivy comic book that was done in the early aughts. It was written by Paul Dini, pencils by Bruce Timm, inks by Shane Glines, horny as hell, which is funny now because like almost 20 years later, the characters are just a couple. They're just like, none of this winking to camera shit.
Yeah.
It's just like, yes, Poison Ivy is dating Harley Quinn.
Before it was like, why are they in bed together?
Exactly. Or like,
They're just comfy.
yeah, it's like, there's some women's prison stuff in there that I'm like, okay, Glines, you drew the R-rated version of this just for you and Tim and Dini, but he is a great character designer. After that, he would work on the Flintstones WWE movie. Justice League Action, which that is Shane Glines as hell, like even more so. Scooby-Doo and Guess Who, and also worked on the recent Harley and Animaniacs shows that we did. So he finally got to draw some canonical Harley and Ivy makeout sessions, finally. And yes, if you follow him on Twitter, he often shares a lot of his great old drawings and like, oh, here's my character designs for, Bonk in this movie. Pretty cool. But I have to warn you, he's horny on main, so follow at your own risk, guys. Let's talk a little bit about the cast, too. Stalker Channing had voiced Barbara Gordon in the TV series, but they say she became unavailable after the first season. So they replaced her with Angie Harmon, who was in her 20s at the time, but she was the tough as nails assistant DA on Law and Order at the time. And I think she does a good job as Barbara. She's good.
Stalker Channing was the guest star that Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein were always trying to get for The Simpsons.
Man, so it's shocking they got her even a little bit for Batman Beyond. Maybe she just doesn't like doing the voice acting. Who knows?
Could be.
They were very friendly about why she wasn't there anymore. And Angie Harmon took over the voice of Barbara in the later episodes as well. And of course, they got back Mark Hamill to resume his role as a Joker. You can't do it without him. And they wanted him to play Joker scarier and quieter, not as manic, which they joked that at first Mark Hamill was like, but I like him manic. I want him big. And they kept having to rein him in, apparently, when the recording started. Also, of course, they had all the TV cast. But we talked about them before. Conroy, Friedel, all those folks. Lauren Tom. But also they had famous folks in the cast as well added to it. You've got Melissa Joan Hart as the Dee Dees. You've got Dean Stockwell, the robo assistant from Quantum Leap. He voices Tim Drake, adult Tim Drake. You got Henry Rollins as the ill-fated Bonk. And one of the first, but not the last, use of Michael Rosenbaum in a DCAU thing. He'd go on to be the Flash in all the Justice League stuff.
I noticed this just because I watched Batman and Mr. Freeze Sub-Zero. In that movie, Mary Kay Bergman plays Batgirl.
Yeah,
and obviously she's not alive for this movie. So there's a new. So was she always Batgirl?
Melissa Gilbert was Batgirl for the couple of Batgirl or Barbara Gordon episodes in the original Fox run, and I do believe that actress took over for her in season 4, The New Adventures. But then for this, obviously, she couldn't come back in 99. And it was Tara Strong taking over the role, who then she'd later be Harley, who Arlene Sorkin still plays Harley in this one. It's an interesting cast here. They wanted Dean Stockwell to play Drake because Dean Stockwell actually got to start as a child actor. One of his kid movies was The Boy with Green Hair. And they're like, oh, well, that's just too perfect that he would play a boy with green hair who grows up into Tim Drake in this.
I had no idea. When I was watching the opening credits, I was like, Melissa Joan Hart.
Yes.
And you know what? She does a fine job as these clown girls.
Yeah, she's good. She's good. And also the She's All That girl, Rachel Lee Cook. She does 2 lines in this movie.
To me, she was the This Is Your Brain on Drugs girl.
Yeah, of course.
They show that pornography to us every day in our homeroom class.
She taught us a lesson in smashing up kitchens. And of course, Andrea Romano, voice director for this still. She's great. And she has one uncredited role in this I'll mention in the movie.
That shocked me to learn that was her because it's very good.
Oh, she's great. And then of the composer for the film, Christopher Carter with a K. He's worked on a million things. He did the season, mostly just TV stuff. He would work on the 3rd season of Batman Beyond. He's still working on super stuff to this day. He just worked on the new seasons of Young Justice and the pretty all right Marvel show, Marvel Rising, which has Squirrel Girl in it, which is why I liked it.
It's a fine score, but to be a little stinker, I still miss the texture of the full orchestra. And it wouldn't fit this style or this tone because it's like the future and techno and all that stuff, but I do miss the texture it would add to the entire production.
Though for the flashback scenes, I think he did get to go at least more orchestral. I bet it wasn't a full orchestra, but yeah, I mean, he was capturing the metal style of the rock metal style of the TV show. But obviously, the biggest change here, let's talk about, is TMS being involved as the animators. Their first time, full-time back on Batman in like 5 years. And, their subsidy, Coco, worked on about half the Batman animated series shows, but This was TMS getting back into the groove with Batman.
I'm guessing once Batman went to WB, they said you were not hiring TMS to work on any of these.
They were
too much.
They were able to afford him for the first season of Superman. But
okay,
after
just Superman. Got it.
So let's talk about where TMS was at this time and recentering it around the director of this film. No offense to Kurt Gaeta, but I honestly think that Toshihiko Masuda is kind of the real director on this because half of the film was storyboarded there. All the animation was finalized. Tim and Murakami, they talk about that they were flying over to Japan several times to work on this. It's not like, say, a Deke production where they say, like, we sent you the storyboards, just fucking do it. Like,
they wait 6 months.
Tim was very involved in it. So was Gaeta. They were working there, but the day-to-day operation of it was overseen by Masuda. So I kind of see him more as the director of this. And he also boarded lots of the film, including 2 sequences that they said looked really great and had to be cut at animatic because they had to lose 14 minutes. So Masuda was one of the many very talented youngsters hired to the A-Team telecom unit that TMS set up under Hayao Miyazaki and Yasuo Otsuka. Listen to our Lupin podcast about that. But short version was the dream of TMS's owner was we're going to make the Little Nemo movie that'll be the international super hit and it'll be the best animated movie ever. And we're going to hire these super awesome young guys like Masuda, and they're going to be trained by the best, by Otsuka and Miyazaki, and they're going to rule the world.
I've actually done a few podcasts that talked about this. There's a Retronauts about Little Nemo the Dream Master because it's based on a movie that was just barely finished.
Yes.
And then the Naughty episode we did for What a Cartoon.
Right. Yeah, and all these guys were working so hard on this Little Nemo thing, and it's just, if you watch Little Nemo, it's a very well animated movie. TMS at their top of their game, but it's just like it doesn't come together. All the problems. The reason Miyazaki and others quit the film, they were like, well, this just doesn't work. It's not an interesting 90-minute movie.
It looks gorgeous. Actually, the pitch for it is even prettier. The pitch without dialogue.
Yes,
and it's just like, I think they just throw out, if we throw enough money and talents, like the Sherman Brothers, Mickey Rooney, all the stars are coming out to shine. It still didn't work.
No.
But that NES game, fun, very hard.
And well, unfortunately for American boys like you and me of the 80s, it was such a money hole that TMS had to put their best people on a bunch of subcontracted American trash to help pay for Little Nemo and Slumberland. But so Masuda, one of their top key animators working on Lupin Part 2 and also Sherlock Hound, he was known for very good frenetic action and wild takes were his calling card. Like even back to his episodes of Sherlock Hound, you can find that he animated on. Characters do these like giant, like cartoony takes. Masuda is so good at that, but also action like that would make him perfect for shows that TMS would work on after Miyazaki left, where Masuda would work on Inspector Gadget, Gummy Bears, DuckTales, fucking Alf. Like the Alf opening, if you've watched the opening to Alf, which is perfect looking, that's all Masuda. Like just cats singing doo-wop songs about how Alf would eat them or whatever. Also, the amazing Real Ghostbusters pilot, that was all him too, or a lot him. He's one of the directing animators on Little Nemo. And of course, Akira. He worked on that like pretty much every TMS top heavyweight. They were an animator on Akira at the very least. So it was really in the 90s that Masuda hit his stride because they were getting priced out. Like Deke couldn't afford TMS anymore. The yen was getting stronger. Even Disney was like, you know what? Can we just hire away a lot of these guys and not work with TMS and make it Walt Disney Japan? The only folks who could afford it were if you were Steven Spielberg, who could make Warner Animation spend a bunch of money. And so Masuda became one of the lead animators on the TMS side for Tiny Toons. Like he had to be one of Spielberg's favorites. He was lead animator on the opening, lead animator on the music video episodes, like the They Might Be Giants music videos me and you loved. That was Masuda. He was the lead director on How I Spent My Vacation.
Oh, God.
And you know how much they wanted to make that Elmira Simpsons type show. He was the director on the pilot for that. So that shows you like, oh, what does the Amblin office believe in for this that much? Let's get Masuda to direct
Wow.
it.
I mean, that was a waste of his time, but everything
Sure
else.
was, yeah.
And check out our episode on the Tiny Toons movie.
Yes, yeah. Man,
Such good animation.
And this makes me want to do the Elmira pilot one just for like what a mess it was. And so Masuda did work a little on Batman the Animated Series, like he did the Fear of Victory episode, I think, which is the second Scarecrow episode, which has some good animation in it, but it's not like the best. But as I found in a 1994 interview with Radomski, TMS preferred working with Amblin more than they did with the Batman team, apparently, or at least during Animaniacs production. Masuda also is credited for some of the best giant wild takes in Animaniacs. More than one episode where they battle Jerry Lewis types. He did that. He was a wacko master. He also did the Potty Emergency. That he was the lead on that one.
If I close my eyes, I could just see his animation in my head because all of those, there's a reason why they stand out the most visually.
Oh God, just seeing a like smack to the face, like seeing the clown face version of Jerry Lewis singing his song.
And I'm glad the TMS freaks now make animation because we covered it in our Animaniacs episode for the 2020 series. I forget what year it was. But they modeled their show after the TMS episodes because they said those are the best. They correctly identified those with the best, snappiest animation.
Of course, and their character models are the best ones too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if we ever do Adventures of Sonic, we're gonna only do his episode Prehistoric Sonic.
I can't believe that.
I mean, it still looks like he had a very low budget, but there's some moments in it that are like, oh shit, he just drew this. Like, this looks awesome. And he was the animation director of the opening to Adventures of Sonic as well. So 94 to 95, it seemed like Amblin could no longer afford them either. He was the director of the Pinky and the Brain Xmas, which was the only TMS Pinky and the Brain on Kids WB.
It won the Emmy for that year, beat The Simpsons.
Deservedly so. I just rewatched it, and it's good. Even watching it, I was like, this looks like 10% less budget than they had on the syndicated Amblin episodes. And so, you know what? I said I wasn't going to mention Katzenberg, but...
no!
94 to 95, it's when TMS couldn't be afforded anymore by the Amblin tunes. That's when Spielberg started up DreamWorks with Katzenberg. I think Warner at that point was like, "Oh, you got fucking DreamWorks, and we're not being nice to you and giving you all the money for your cartoons anymore."
And they were also, a lot of them were leaving Fox at the same time, and Fox had the purse strings as well.
Yeah, and then it didn't help that after that, Kids WB realizes. Oh, a better way to use Japanese subcontractors is to just buy completed anime series and dub it over with non-union people. But that lesson would come later. So since the Masuda and the TMS team weren't working on as much Amblin stuff anymore, they then moved over to the DC side. But they got a special deal on that. In the first season of Superman, they agreed to do the production, but they're like, they wanted more power. TMS was like, we want to do the boarding ourselves. We want to fully direct it in-house and do a lot more of the production work in-house. You just send us the scripts pretty much and the character models. Kids WB and Tim were like, yeah, fucking do it. Like, you guys have earned the right. You've earned that level of trust. So if you think about what are the best looking episodes of the first season of Superman or even the second season, they're all TMS ones. Like the World's Finest 3-parter, that's all Masuda and his team. So then the team is looking to get a foothold more in the U.S. market. We talked about how they did a Canadian co-production on Cyber 6. Masuda was series director on that. But there was another one I forgot about, and I feel like we're going to have to do it as a movie someday, Bob.
Oh, what's this?
So I never once was curious about the direct-to-video film American Tail 3.
Oh.
But it's Masuda's the director, and TMS did it, and it looks... Because Amblimation did it for Universal, and if you look at it, it's like, oh, these are all the Animaniacs crew doing very good work on a story set in the American Tail world that is about police brutality, about unions, about the indigenous people of Manhattan. Like, it actually looks pretty good.
I assumed it ended with part 2.
I had no, because it came out in 1998, so we were like 16. What were we going to pay attention to it? But now that I've seen clips from it, it's like, holy shit, this is TMS doing awesome work on American Tail. It's because 2 sucked as a kid. I remember not liking 2. They didn't get the Bluth team for it. It was after the Spielberg-Bluth breakup.
I think they really thrive with funny animals.
They're really good
even
at
though they're
it.
great at human action, as in this movie. But man, that's their best stuff, I think.
So Masuda and his team did American Tail 3 in 1998. They do Cyber 6 in 1999. We did the whole podcast on it. But the important thing to know is that, like, this was them doing action tunes. And it was the first time they did it all digital. And it definitely was a takeoff on, oh, this is what we were so good at with Batman and Superman. Let's do it for a thing we own. Also, like, let's even top the scenes we did of like, oh, we did an awesome Clayface scene. Let's do an even better goopy villain who squishes around. But unfortunately, Cyber 6 was not the hit TMS wanted it to be. It would debut in Canada in 1999, wouldn't make its US debut until 2000. So TMS has this team that Cyber 6 was not renewed for a second season. What are they going to do with all these folks in late 1999? Well, that's why I think they were able to do the Batman Beyond movie, because they had the full Cyber 6 team with no second season. And here comes Warner with like home video money. And even though it seemed like TMS was wanting to do more of their stuff they own, I think they couldn't turn it down. They're like, all right. So the Cyber 6 team goes straight to Return the Joker with Masuda in charge of it. And it's also, why it is a digital film, and it looks great for 2000 digital animation. It's about as good as it gets then in 2D, I think.
And in current TMS news, did you know, Henry, that there is a new Lupin the Third series premiering?
Oh, yes.
This month. And actually, if you're listening to this now, and you should be, the first episode came out in mid-October. So part 6 is out now.
All right. I'm going to watch this. I didn't keep up enough with part 5. I'm going to watch that one.
I will say
sure.
part 4, I watched all of it during COVID times, which we're still in, I guess.
Yeah.
That will be a future episode of What a
boy.
Cartoon.
All right.
I still have to watch
wait.
part 5. I have not watched it yet.
I just ordered the Blu-ray of part 3 they just put out, too. I've never given enough love to the old pink-jacketed man. But yes, I also think at the time that it was because it was a direct-to-DVD budget, they could actually afford them. And I also, though, wonder, because this film, spoiler alert, had some very last-minute retakes, I wonder if TMS was like, fuck it, we shouldn't have signed up for this. This is the last one. Because this really was the last, this is the end of an era for TMS. I double-checked through their corporate history. For a time, this was their last overseas collaboration, and definitely their last one of the classic era of TMS.
Maybe we'll get to it in the discussion of the movie, but I noticed like one giant error that I was surprised wasn't done as a retake, because one character is talking, but the other character's lips are moving.
Oh,
and I was surprised to see that in direct-to-DVD thing.
Man, I missed that. Okay.
They're very small on the screen, but it was very glaring to me.
So after they finished this production, by the end of 2000, they're working on that Hamtaro show. Like, they're like, oh, we can make a Pokemon, pretty much.
Those things are adorable.
I love those little hams. They're great. And of course, in the early 2000s, that's when Sega started buying more and more of ownership in TMS. And in 2005, TMS would be owned by Sega Sammy. And pretty much for the early aughts, TMS just worked on their internal stuff, either Hamtaro, Lupin, Detective Conan never stops. Like, it keeps going. It probably paid a whole lot of bills, at Detective Conan. And lots of other TMS shows, too.
Are you forgetting Sonic X?
Oh, of course, Sonic X.
Speaking of funny animals running around.
They would ultimately come back to Warner one more time. From 2009 to 2012, they would animate 3 more DC direct-to-video movies that were Justice League or Green Lantern or Wonder Woman. But after that, they pretty much were done. Though sometimes Masuda will do, or other animators who worked on TMS DC productions, they will do subcontracted work of like, oh, this awesome-looking scene in this Superman direct-to-video movie from last year, Masuda animated that because maybe he has a sweet spot for Superman. He's like, you know what, I misdrawn Superman. I'll do this one cut that's like 20 seconds. Masuda also, on top of directing a ton of things, he also seems like he just animates subcontractually for stuff when he feels like it, or for big deals like tons of Ghibli stuff. He's like a scene here or there. There's some really great debris-filled scenes in Howl's Moving Castle that are credited to Masuda. There's some really cool action scenes from Pokemon, the TV series, that are like, whoa, this looks way more fluid than I expect from Pokemon. He did those. He did, I think, one of the Death Note openings, too.
Okay, wow.
Worked on that.
Do we have an age on this guy? Is he like in his 60s by now?
He is approaching 60.
Okay,
now.
wow.
Yeah, and he even directed a Lupin special that I had not seen before from the aughts called The Elusiveness of Fog, which I believe is a time travel Lupin story. I'm going to give that one a watch, though, soon. And yeah, approaching 60, still has some recent credits on boards or key animation on stuff, including recent Lupin things. So Masuda still at it. And One of the only like pictures I could find of him was him posed with like a drawing he made of Cyber Six of like, yeah, it's like, so that I think is still a very special series to him. And I feel so bad what you see what they pulled off in this Return of the Joker movie. You're like, God damn, I wish they had gotten to do a second season of Cyber Six. They were doing so good.
It's a gorgeous show.
All right. Last bit of history here. Why is there an uncut edition of Batman Beyond Return of the Joker? What happened? So even on the commentary, they noted that they were pushing the envelope as far as they could. They really wanted more violence in it. They were loving the action, and they were probably, me personally, I think they were feeling so handcuffed by all these post-Columbine rules on Kids WB. They're like, well, then that pushes them even more to want to break those rules and get extra violent. And Warner Home Video, with Gene McCurdy having their back, was told like, yeah, you know, cut this down a little bit, cut that down a little bit, but you can kill people on screen, a couple key people, a death can happen, just do it. So at San Diego Comic-Con in July of 2000, the buzz was growing more and more. They finally had some animation for it. I found a commercial, well, the first commercial for Batman Return of the Joker, it was before they had any finished animation or even a decided upon like logo. It's just like, next year he'll be back, ha 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 ha, and you just hear the Joker's voice. It's like, fall of 2000, the DVD movie Return of the Joker.
Clip not done yet.
but by July they did have some animation. Tim and Dini were really proud of it. They cut together a trailer that made it look like it was about the murder of Robin. They were trying to trick the fans because like they were very online themselves and they knew what the fans were saying about it or what their guesses were. So they wanted to trick them, but the buzz was big. As somebody viewing Ain't It Cool News at the time, and the disgusting owner of the website wrote about it a lot. I think he was, friendly with Paul Dini and those other guys. So he was getting the insider info of like, oh man, this looks so great. On August 19th, 2000, he wrote a post saying like, this is going to be the most hardcore, awesome Batman cartoon ever, man. Finally, a Batman cartoon that goes there. I feel like via Ain't It Cool News, Dini, Tim, and his friends were really talking up how this was not Batman for kids anymore.
Because this rarely comes up on the program here, Henry, I have to recommend anyone out there, if you accidentally swallow poison, go to your computer and look up the Blade 2 review on Ain't It Cool News. It will induce vomiting, and it's still online. I can't believe it's still online.
I feel like a court order should force it to always be online. Like
government censorship should work in this case, I think.
It's one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen. Yeah, the second you said Blade 2, I couldn't remember where you were going because I buried it as far in my memory as I could.
I'm sorry. Please don't cancel your Patreon subscription if you read it and are disgusted.
But unfortunately, I hate to bring them up because every fucking website from the year 2000 basically doesn't exist anymore other than Ain't It Cool almost. Like it was really hard to find archival stuff about reporting on this at the time that wasn't Ain't It Cool, which was very annoying to me. But yeah, so in August 2000, they're like, yeah, what an awesome film. Check it out in October. When did things change here? Because it wasn't long after that, online scuttlebutt starts saying like, hey, what's going on with this? Even in the early days of Amazon, people could see that their orders of the Batman Beyond DVD that was scheduled for October 24th got delayed to a vague date, and nobody knew what was up. Behind the scenes, as Dini would reveal in that 2012 Kevin Smith interview, what happened was they were given a lot of leeway by Warner Home Video because it was going to be on VHS and DVD. Nearing the end of it, it is time to screen the film for a bunch of executives, including Kids WB executives. And he said that one of the execs said it was way too violent for them to promote on their TV network. So while technically Kids WB didn't say, you have to edit this film because it wasn't their department, if that film is not advertised on Kids WB, that is a death sentence sales-wise. So effectively, it was them saying, you have to cut down this film or it will die on the shelves.
I mean, I guess maybe things were different or simpler back then, but upon watching this again, my thought was, this isn't really that bad.
No, it really isn't. But, well, there's some very key history here that why they really, really cared at Kids WB about not advertising this. So in mid-September of the year 2000, in the United States Senate, led by Senators John McCain,
Boo.
Joseph Lieberman,
Boo.
and Lynn Cheney, boo, they are all condemning Hollywood specifically for how they market violent imagery to children.
It's the sickos. They're at it again, people.
And 15 months after Columbine, the FTC has completed a study that says television for children, like Kids WB, is illegally advertising too much violence towards children in their daytime hours. And so it's all about politics. It comes down to it. Like, Lieberman is very much on the protect our children route, and also because it is very bipartisan, because here he's doing it with Cheney and McCain, and he is, the vice presidential running mate in the 2000 election. So here it's September of 2000, 2 months before the election, Lieberman thinks he's got a home run here with protect our children bullshit. And obviously, as gamers, we know that Lieberman's real target was violent video games in 2000, but cartoons that advertised violent stuff to kids was certainly also an enemy of his. Imagine you're this Kids WB executive. You're sat down to watch this movie you're going to advertise on a kids show, and you see a child with a gun kill a man. And you're like, I can't advertise this.
John McCain will be furious.
So here's what they were up against. This is quoting Joseph Lieberman, September 13th of 2000. But if the entertainment industry fails to act, and if they market adult-rated products to kids in violation of their own standards, then I believe they must be held accountable. Specifically, if the FTC has the proper authority, it should move swiftly to bring actions under its false and deceptive advertising rules. So at the time, I did not understand this political context. I was just like, oh, the babysitters at Kids WB don't want me to see the Joker punch somebody. But it literally was like the FTC is saying, we might arrest you if you advertise a violent kids cartoon.
That was like what Hillary Clinton did 5 years later, where if you're a GameStop manager and one of your employees sells Grand Theft Auto to a kid, you're in jail now.
Yeah, it's the dumbest shit in the world. I hate it. Dems thought that this was a winning formula for them too, instead of a big time loser. But I mean, of course, this is the Lieberman, especially, who just is a Republican.
For sure.
But he was like, no, this is bipartisan. Don't you love this? I'm working with John McCain on this.
Not to bring it up again, but you should see the demons Hillary Clinton worked with for her bipartisan video game crap in the mid-aughts.
Yeah.
It is disturbing.
When those kids could grow up to vote in 2016, who'd have thought?
That's my conspiracy theory, in that she alienated a lot of young people.
I know. I mean, obviously, Donald Trump's worse.
Yes.
I get it. You don't have to tell me, guys, obviously.
And I voted for her.
Yes, I did too. And a fat lot of good it did. Anyway, also, I would say, ironically, for Lieberman saying this about how troubled he is that children are watching violent imagery, a year later, he would authorize military-aged young people to commit violence all over the place in the illegal invasion of Iraq.
The correct kind of violence.
Exactly.
Imperial violence.
Yeah. So anyway, with all of that pressure, as an election is looming, it's September 2000 or late August, Kids WB exec goes like, you have to cut this down. I can't advertise something this violent. And unfortunately, Jean McCurdy is not as strong as she used to be in the Warner Brothers business, so she can't say shove it. They have to do it.
Hope she don't crash. Hope she don't crash.